You just celebrated a stock rally built on Greenland's rare earths. Do you even know what you just signed off on? Markets went up, futures climbed. CNBC called it a relief rally, and you? You probably felt that little dopamine hit when your portfolio ticked green. But let me ask you something. Do you know why the markets rallied? It wasn't because tariffs disappeared. It wasn't because inflation got solved. It was because Trump announced a deal on Greenland, a deal that hands the United States access to rare earth elements that China has monopolized for 2 decades. And Wall Street didn't celebrate sovereignty or strategy. They celebrated the end of Chinese leverage. So here's your first choice. Are you going to keep pretending this is about Greenland? Or are you ready to admit this is about who controls the supply chain that runs your phone, your missiles, and your entire defense grid? Rare earths are not rare. They are a choke point. Let's do the power math. China controls 70% of global rare earth mining and 90% of refining capacity. That means neodymium for your F-35 fighter jets, dysprosium for wind turbines, europium for missiles, terbium for sonar systems. You think the Pentagon runs on good vibes? It runs on Chinese refined materials. Greenland has one of the largest undeveloped rare earth deposits on Earth. The Kvanefjeld project alone holds enough reserves to break Beijing's stranglehold on the entire Western defense industrial base. Trump didn't buy Greenland in 2019. He got laughed at. Now, he's signing ceremonies in Davos with a deal no one will explain. And the market pumps because they know what it means. It means the U.S. just clawed back leverage it hasn't had since the 1980s. But here's what no one's telling you. Denmark still technically owns Greenland. And guess who's been financing Greenland's infrastructure projects for a decade? China. Guess who has mineral exploration agreements already in place? China. So what did Trump actually deal, and what did Denmark give up to avoid a NATO blowout? You don't know. I don't know. But the market does, and it likes it. Now let's talk about the Board of Peace you are ignoring. While you were watching rare earth headlines, Trump's doing something that should scare you more. He's building a coalition without Europe, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Qatar, UAE, all signed onto Trump's so-called Board of Peace, a framework that has zero NATO involvement and is designed to freeze conflicts Trump doesn't want to pay for anymore. Notice who's not on that list: the UK, France, Germany. The Brits are holding off because of Putin concerns. Translation: they don't trust that Trump won't hand Ukraine to Moscow in exchange for rare earth, logistics, and a détente that keeps Russian oil flowing to swing states in the global south. But here's the power move you're missing. Trump doesn't need Europe anymore. He's got the Gulf states. He's got Egypt controlling Suez. He's got Turkey holding the Bosporus. He's got Pakistan and Indonesia, nuclear powers and demographic giants, in a coalition that looks a hell of a lot like a 21st century non-aligned movement, except this time it's aligned with Washington. So ask yourself, if Trump can stabilize the Middle East without Paris and access rare earths without Beijing, what does he need Berlin for? Europe just lost the plot, and they don't even know it yet. Here's what's happening in real time. Trump is decoupling American security architecture from European approval. He's building coalitions that don't require German consensus or French veto power. And Europe? They're still treating this like 1995, like they get a say. They don't. The Gulf states didn't join Trump's Board of Peace because they love democracy. They joined because they know where the oil revenue is going, into sovereign wealth funds that buy U.S. equities, infrastructure, and influence. And Trump's offering them something Europe never could: operational autonomy without the lecture. Turkey gets to play power broker in the Black Sea. Egypt gets debt relief. Saudi Arabia gets nuclear tech on the table. And all of them get to hedge against China without submitting to Brussels-style regulation. You think that's not a realignment? That's the realignment. And Europe's response? Holding press conferences about concerns over Putin, Concerns don't stop pipelines. Concerns don't secure rare earths. Concerns don't build coalitions. Power does. Now let's talk Iran. Because Trump just said the quiet part out loud. Hopefully no further action needed against Iran. Stop. Read that again. He didn't say Iran is no longer a threat. He didn't say diplomacy worked. He said hopefully no further action needed. That's not peace. That's a conditional ceasefire based on leverage Trump now holds and Iran knows it can't counter. What leverage? Start with the Board of Peace. Every state that just signed on is either Sunni majority or has a vested interest in containing Iranian influence. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, these aren't neutral actors. They're counter-Iran by design. Trump just built a coalition that encircles Tehran without firing a shot. Add Greenland's rare earths into the mix. If the U.S. can refine its own materials, it doesn't need to worry about Chinese retaliation when it sanctions Iranian oil. It doesn't need to beg Europe to enforce embargoes. It can strangle Iran's export economy unilaterally. And here's the kicker. Iran knows it. That's why Trump can say, hopefully no further action needed. Because Tehran's looking at a map where Iraq is destabilized, Syria is a ruin, the Gulf states are allied against them, and the U.S. just secured the resource independence to outlast any escalation. Iran blinked. Trump's just saying it louder. But do you think that's permanent, or do you think that's a countdown? So what happens when Europe realizes it's irrelevant? Because that's the end game here. Trump's building a world where American power doesn't route through NATO. It routes through the Gulf, through Greenland, through Jakarta, and Islamabad. And Europe? They're a market, a liability, a legacy cost. You think Germany's going to love that? You think France is going to sit quietly while Washington builds coalitions that treat Paris like a spectator? No. They're going to hedge, and that hedge looks like deeper accommodation with Beijing. It looks like Macron flying to China for trade deals, while Trump signs rare earth agreements in the Arctic. It looks like the EU trying to play middleman in a world that doesn't need middlemen anymore. And when that happens, when Europe realizes it can't veto American strategy and can't compete with Chinese capital, you're going to see the transatlantic alliance fracture in ways that make Brexit look like a minor admin issue. You think your stock portfolio is insulated from that? You think rare earth supply chains hold steady when Europe starts a regulatory war with Washington over digital sovereignty and trade access? You don't. Here's the real question you need to ask yourself. Do you think Trump's playing checkers? Do you think the Greenland deal is about Greenland? Do you think the Board of Peace is about peace? Do you think no further action needed means Iran's off the table? Or do you think you're watching the architecture of the next 30 years being built in real time? And the only people who don't see it are the ones still pretending 2016 was an accident. Because if you believe the latter, if you believe Trump's moves are strategic, not chaotic, then you also have to believe the consequences are already in motion. And those consequences look like a U.S. that doesn't need Chinese rare earths, a Middle East coalition that bypasses Europe, an Iran that's cornered but not contained, a NATO that's optional, and a market that rallies every time American autonomy increases and European influence fades. You celebrated the stock bump, but you didn't ask what it cost, and you definitely didn't ask who's paying for it next. So here's your last question. When the Board of Peace fractures, when Iran retaliates, when Europe starts a trade war, because it has no other leverage left, are you going to be ready, or are you still going to be Googling, what are rare earths, while your entire portfolio rebalances around a world you didn't see coming, because it's already here? And the only thing left to decide is whether you're positioned for it or buried under it.